The CH-47 Chinook descended into the valley under cover of darkness, its twin rotors beating against the thin mountain air. Lieutenant Commander James Hartley sat with his team of 8 SEALs, weapons between their knees, faces painted black and green. At the far end of the cabin sat Catherine Reynolds, medical bag strapped across her chest, hands folded calmly in her lap. "You ever been this far north, nurse?" Petty Officer Derek Sullivan called over the rotor noise. Catherine looked up. 3 times. "You?" Sullivan grinned. "First rotation. But I'm a shooter. You just carry the bandages." A few chuckles rippled through the team. Catherine said nothing, her eyes returning to the darkness beyond the open ramp. She had learned long ago that certain battles were not worth fighting. Not with words, anyway. The mission briefing had been straightforward. Extract a high-value intelligence asset from a compound 15 kilometers into hostile territory. 8 hours in, 8 hours out. Minimal contact expected. Catherine had heard similar assessments before. She packed extra gauze. Chief Petty Officer Marcus Webb, the team's senior enlisted, watched Catherine from across the cabin. In 3 deployments, he had worked with 7 different corpsmen and medics. Most were competent, some were exceptional. But something about Reynolds was different. The way she secured her gear had the precision of someone who had done more than attend medical courses. The way her eyes scanned the cabin was not passive observation but active assessment. 2 minutes, the crew chief announced. The team stood, checked weapons, adjusted night vision mounts. Catherine rose with them, her movements economical and practiced. She touched each pouch on her vest. Medical supplies, yes, but also water, energy bars, spare batteries, a knife with a 4-inch blade strapped to her right thigh. "Stay close to Webb," Hartley told her, his tone not unkind but firm. "If contact happens, you hit the ground and let us work." "Understood, sir." The Chinook flared, and the team poured out into the Afghan night. Catherine was 5th off the ramp, landing in a crouch, immediately scanning for threats while the others established a perimeter. The helicopter lifted away, and silence rushed in to fill the space its rotors had occupied. They moved in formation through the rocky terrain, Catherine positioned in the middle of the column. She matched their pace exactly, never lagging, never crowding the man ahead. When they went prone to avoid a passing vehicle on a distant road, she was down before the hand signal finished. When they crossed a dry stream bed, her footfalls made no more sound than theirs. After 2 hours of movement, Petty Officer Ryan Kowalski whispered to Sullivan during a security halt. "She's quiet." "She's scared," Sullivan replied. But Catherine was not scared. She was counting paces, counting terrain features, counting the number of compounds they passed. She was building a map in her mind, marking fields of fire, noting cover positions, identifying choke points, old habits, muscle memory from another time. At 0340 hours, they reached the overwatch position, a cluster of boulders on a hillside with clear lines of sight to the target compound 800 meters below. Hartley set security, assigned sectors, and established the command post behind the largest rock. Catherine unpacked her medical supplies and organized them by priority. Hemorrhage control closest, airway management next, then fluids and medications. "Coffee?" Webb offered, extending a thermos. "Thank you, Chief." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the eastern horizon where dawn would eventually break. "You're calm," Webb observed. "Most medical personnel get jumpy on their first direct action mission." Catherine took a careful sip. "This isn't my first." "No, Chief." He waited for elaboration, but none came. Catherine handed back the thermos and returned to her supplies, hands moving with the confidence of someone who had performed these tasks hundreds of times. Webb noticed her fingers pause over a particular pouch, saw her check its contents, then secure it differently than before. It was a small thing, but in his experience, small things mattered. The compound below showed minimal activity. 2 guards walked lazy patrols. A light burned in one window. The intelligence suggested their target was being held in the northern building, 2nd floor, 3rd room from the east. "Primary and alternate routes confirmed," reported Sergeant First Class Nathan Pierce, the team's breacher. "Walls are mud brick. One entry point has a reinforced door. I'll need 2 charges." Hartley studied the compound through his scope. "Catherine, if we take casualties during extraction, can you work in a moving vehicle?" "Yes, sir. I've done it before." "Where?" She met his eyes. "Helmand Province, Sangin District, also twice in Kunar." Hartley nodded slowly. The names she cited were not tourist destinations. They were places where people died badly and often. Good to know. Dawn arrived without fanfare, a gradual graying of the sky that turned the landscape from black to charcoal to brown. The team rotated through security shifts while Catherine checked and rechecked her supplies. She had done this dance before, in places whose names she tried not to remember. At 0720 hours, movement increased in the compound. Children emerged to tend goats. Women carried water from a central well. The two guards changed shifts, the new pair looking only marginally more alert than their predecessors. "Look soft," Sullivan muttered. "Looks are cheap," Webb replied. "Stay sharp." Catherine observed the compound with different eyes than the men around her. She noticed the women moved in a pattern that avoided certain areas. She saw how the children stayed away from the eastern wall. She noted the way dust had settled unevenly on the rooftops, suggesting recent foot traffic in specific locations. These details told stories, and she had learned to read them. By 1100 hours, the temperature had climbed above 90 degrees. The team consumed water in careful measures, maintained noise discipline, and waited. This was the nature of their work. Hours of patient observation punctuated by minutes of controlled violence. During her watch, Catherine allowed her mind to wander, but only along carefully controlled paths. She thought about her training, about the instructors who had molded her into something more than a medic. She thought about the qualifications she had earned, the ranges where she had outshot men twice her size, the close-quarters battle courses where she had learned to move through buildings like smoke. She thought about the orders that had ended all of that. A hand touched her shoulder. Webb, signaling her watch was over. She acknowledged silently and moved back to the command post, where Hartley was reviewing the final assault plan with his team leaders. Initial entry team: Pierce, Sullivan, Kowalski. You clear the ground floor and secure the stairwell. Webb, you take Thompson and Martinez upstairs to locate the package. I'll hold the courtyard with Davidson. Catherine remains at the entry point to receive casualties. Questions? There were none. This was what they trained for, what they existed to do. At 1,430 hours, a battered truck entered the compound. 4 men dismounted, 2 carrying AK-47 seconds openly. They spoke with the guards, gestured toward the northern building, then departed. The guards seemed more alert afterward. Timeline just moved, Hartley said quietly. We go at 1,600. Full daylight, maximum chaos. Use their afternoon prayer routine for cover. The next 90 minutes stretched like hours. Catherine went through her mental checklist, reviewing tourniquet placement, reviewing chest seal procedures, reviewing the steps for treating tension pneumothorax. But underneath the medical knowledge ran another current. Sight pictures, breathing control, trigger discipline, immediate action drills for weapon malfunctions. She pushed those thoughts down. That was not who she was anymore. The orders had been clear. At 1,545 hours, the call to prayer echoed from a distant mosque. In the compound below, the guards set down their weapons and faced Mecca. The team began final preparations. Catherine helped Sullivan check his breaching charges. Her hands were steady as she verified the detonator connections. She had done this before too, though Sullivan did not know it. "You ever fire a weapon, nurse?" he asked, his tone less mocking than curious. "I've qualified with several," she replied, which was true, also insufficient. Qualified did not capture the thousands of rounds she had put down range. It did not describe the muscle memory that could strip and reassemble an M4 carbine in 18 seconds. It did not convey the small matter of her previous role, before the incident, before the review board, before her carefully negotiated reassignment to medical services. "Good," Sullivan said. "Stay behind us and you'll be fine." The assault began with precision. Pierce placed his first charge on the compound's outer gate, and the explosion shattered the afternoon stillness. The team flowed through the breach in textbook formation, moving with the coordinated efficiency of men who had rehearsed these movements until they became instinct. Catherine followed Webb into the compound, staying in her assigned position, scanning her sector while the shooters engaged threats. The initial resistance was minimal. 2 guards attempted to retrieve their weapons and died before reaching them. A third appeared in a doorway and fell to a 3-round burst from Martinez. The entry team reached the northern building. Pierce placed his second charge on the reinforced door. The blast echoed off the mud walls, and Sullivan went through first, weapon up, searching for targets. Ground floor clear. Webb's element started up the narrow staircase. Catherine established her casualty collection point at the base of the stairs, exactly where Hartley had designated. Through the doorway, she could see the courtyard, could see Davidson covering their 6 o'clock, could see the walls and rooftops beyond. could see the figures appearing on those rooftops. "Contact rear!" Davidson shouted, opening fire. The carefully planned operation disintegrated in seconds. What intelligence had missed, what reconnaissance had failed to identify, now revealed itself. This was not a holding facility. It was a trap. Automatic weapons fire raked the courtyard from 3 directions. Davidson went down immediately, hit in the leg and shoulder. Hartley dragged him toward cover as rounds sparked off the stone walls around them. "All elements, we are compromised." Hartley's voice cut through the radio. "Execute E&E protocol." But there was no escape and evasion. The compound's single exit was now a kill zone. Whoever had planned this ambush had studied American tactics and prepared accordingly. Catherine moved without thinking, pulling Davidson into the building while Hartley laid suppressing fire. The wounded SEAL's leg wound was catastrophic. Femoral artery compromised, blood pressure dropping rapidly. She applied a tourniquet high and tight, her hands performing the steps her mind no longer needed to consciously direct. "Catherine, can he move?" Hartley called. "Not without carrying him, sir." Upstairs, gunfire erupted. Webb's voice crackled over the radio. "Multiple hostiles, 2nd floor. Package is not here. Repeat, this is a dry hole." Pierce appeared at the top of the stairs, half carrying Kowalski, whose face was a mask of blood from a head wound. Catherine pulled them both down, began assessing injuries while the building shook with impacts from rocket-propelled grenades. The situation was deteriorating from critical to catastrophic. Outside, the volume of enemy fire increased. Inside, the team was pinned, wounded, and running low on ammunition. Catherine worked on Kowalski's head wound, determining it was superficial despite the dramatic bleeding, then moved to help Pierce distribute the remaining medical supplies. That was when she saw the calculations running in Pierce's eyes. Saw him counting rounds, counting wounded, counting options. She had seen that look before, on the faces of men who understood they were about to die. "Chief," she called upstairs, "how many shooters do you count?" "At least 15, maybe 20. The math was simple and brutal. 8 SEALs, 2 seriously wounded, surrounded by a force nearly 3 times their size that held the high ground and knew the terrain. Without air support, without reinforcements, their options were exhausted. Catherine felt the old training surfaces, unbidden and unwelcome. She found herself analyzing fields of fire, identifying the rhythm of enemy movement, calculating angles and distances. She tried to push it down, to focus on her medical duties, but the tactical assessment ran parallel to everything else, an unwanted gift she could not return. The radio died at 1,623 hours. Martinez had been carrying the primary communication system, and an RPG had found his position. The backup radio, damaged in the initial assault, emitted only static. They were alone. Hartley made the only decision available: consolidate in the building, hold as long as possible, hope for a miracle. The team collapsed inward, dragging their wounded, abandoning the courtyard to enemy fire. They barricaded the ground floor, stacked furniture against windows, prepared for a siege they could not win. Catherine worked in the dim interior, moving between wounded men, rationing supplies that would not last. Davidson's bleeding was controlled, but he had lost too much blood. Kowalski was ambulatory but concussed. Thompson had taken shrapnel in his arm, and Sullivan's left hand had 2 fingers broken from impact with a doorframe during the retreat. "Count off," Hartley ordered. "Ammunition." The responses came in grim sequence. Webb had 3 magazines, Pierce had 2, Martinez was down to his last, Sullivan had 4, but his damaged hand made reloading difficult. Thompson could still shoot despite his arm wound. Catherine said nothing. She was medical personnel. She carried no rifle. Those had been her orders. Outside, the enemy fire shifted from sustained suppression to calculated harassment. They were patient now, content to wait, to let the trapped Americans exhaust themselves in their ammunition. Occasional bursts would rake the windows, would probe the barricades, would test for weakness. "They're calling for reinforcements," Webb assessed. "They'll hit us after dark with everyone they can gather." Hartley checked his watch. 3 hours until sunset. 3 hours to prepare for a final stand. Catherine finished bandaging Thompson's arm and moved to check Davidson's vitals. The SEAL's skin was pale, pulse rapid and thready. He needed a hospital, needed blood, needed care she could not provide, in a besieged building in the middle of hostile territory. "Sorry, Doc," Davidson whispered. "Guess I messed up your quiet day. Save your strength." "You scared?" Catherine met his eyes. Yes, it was true, though not in the way he imagined. She was scared of what would happen when the ammunition ran out, scared of what orders she would follow or ignore when the enemy came through those barricaded doors, scared of the person she had been, the person she had promised not to be again. A burst of automatic fire shattered the upper window. Pierce returned fire, controlled pairs, making each round count. The afternoon wore on, marked by sporadic exchanges, by the gradual exhaustion of resources, by the mathematical certainty of their situation. At 1,702 hours, Webb came downstairs from a reconnaissance of the upper floor. His expression told Hartley everything. North wall is compromised. They're placing charges. When they blow it, they'll have a straight shot into this room. Time? Maybe 30 minutes, maybe less. Hartley nodded slowly, accepting this new variable in an equation that had no solution. He gathered his team with his eyes, these men he had trained with and led into harm for 3 years. Listen up. When they breach, we stack left and right of the opening. Let them funnel in, then we engage at close range. We make them pay for every step. Catherine, you stay in the far corner with Davidson and Kowalski. When it's done, you surrender. Tell them you're medical. They might. No, sir. The voice was Catherine's, but the tone was not one of discussion. It was the voice of someone stating a tactical assessment, someone who had commanded before. That's an order, Catherine. With respect, sir, it's an order I cannot follow. Before Hartley could respond, the world exploded. The enemy had placed their charges wrong or right, depending on perspective. Instead of creating a controlled breach in the north wall, they brought down a quarter of the second floor. The collapse buried 2 SEALs under rubble and created a gap through which gunfire immediately poured. Pierce went down, hit in the chest. His body armor caught most of it, but the impact threw him backward, ribs cracked, breath gone. Sullivan tried to cover him and took a round through his calf. The man screamed, went down, tried to crawl toward cover. His rifle skittered across the floor. It stopped 3 feet from where Catherine crouched. Time expanded in that moment, the way it did before critical decisions. She saw the rifle, saw Sullivan trying to reach it with his damaged hand and wounded leg, saw enemy fighters beginning to climb through the breach in the wall. She saw Hartley and Webb trying to cover multiple angles, saw their ammunition counters running toward zero, saw the mathematical inevitability of their deaths, saw the orders she had been given 2 years ago. You will not engage in combat operations. You will serve in medical capacity only. This is a condition of your continued service. Saw the faces of the men she had trained, the instructors who had shaped her, the targets she had hit at impossible distances. Saw Sullivan's blood spreading across the floor. Catherine Reynolds picked up the rifle. The weapon felt like coming home. The weight, the balance, the slight imperfection in the stock where someone had carved their initials, all of it familiar, all of it right. Catherine's hands moved without conscious thought, checking the magazine, verifying the chamber, flipping the safety to fire. "Nurse, put it down!" Webb shouted from his position by the window. She did not put it down. An enemy fighter appeared in the breach, weapon rising. Catherine's rifle came up smooth and fast, sight picture acquired, breathing controlled, trigger press gradual and perfect. The shot took him in the upper chest. He fell backward. The room went silent except for the ringing of ears. Every SEAL stared at her, not at the fact she had fired, but at how she had fired. The stance, the economy of movement, the single shot placed exactly where it needed to go. "Who the hell are you?" Hartley asked quietly. Catherine did not answer. 2 more fighters were coming through the breach. She engaged both, 2 shots each, center mass. They dropped. She moved to a different position, knowing that muzzle flash gave away location, knowing that static shooters were dead shooters. 3 o'clock window, she called, and Webb shifted to cover it before his conscious mind caught up with the fact that he was taking orders from their medic. The enemy attack, already committed, could not easily reverse. More fighters poured through the breach, and Catherine met them with precision fire. Not spraying, not panic shooting, but the controlled violence of someone who had done this before and done it well. She dropped to one knee beside Sullivan, still firing, still covering angles. "Can you shoot?" "My hand." "Can you shoot?" He nodded. She pulled him to a position where he could brace his rifle against debris, giving him a stable platform despite his injuries. "Cover the doorway, slow and steady, make them think twice." Sullivan did as instructed, because in that moment Catherine's voice carried the authority of someone who belonged in this chaos, someone who understood its rhythms and rules. Martinez appeared from the collapsed section of the second floor, dusty but mobile. Catherine directed him to reinforce Pierce's position without breaking her own rhythm of fire. She was not thinking now, just executing, letting years of training override the orders, override the promises, override everything except the immediate necessity of keeping her people alive. "Reloading," she called, dropping the empty magazine, seating a fresh one in 2 seconds flat. A rocket-propelled grenade streaked through the breach and impacted against the far wall. The explosion was devastating in the confined space, showering everyone with debris. Catherine felt something hot slice across her left shoulder but ignored it, acquiring her next target, servicing it with 2 rounds, moving to the next. The enemy fire began to slacken. They had expected a massacre, an easy finish to trapped prey. Instead, they were taking casualties, their attack disrupted by accurate fire from unexpected positions. Catherine made a tactical assessment in the space between heartbeats. The enemy was committed but disorganized. They had numbers but poor coordination. They owned the high ground but were funneling through limited access points. "Chief Webb," she called. "Yeah. Can you reach the northeast window?" "Maybe." "Do it. Suppress their support element. They're directing fire from the compound wall." Webb moved without questioning, because the assessment was correct, and he knew it. Thompson followed him, providing covering fire. Together, they engaged the enemy commander's position, and the coordinated assault began to fracture. Hartley watched all of this while returning fire, his mind trying to reconcile the woman he had brought on this mission with the operator who was currently directing his team's defense. Questions could come later. Right now, they were staying alive, and that was enough. Catherine moved through the building with the confidence of someone reading a language they had once spoken fluently. She identified firing positions, designated sectors, redistributed ammunition from those who could no longer shoot to those who could. Her medical training merged with her combat training, a hybrid skill set that made her simultaneously lethal and healing. "Pierce, can you move?" she asked the downed breacher. "Ribs are smashed. Can't breathe deep." She checked his eyes, his color, listened to his chest. "Pneumothorax, but not tension. You can shoot if you stay sitting. Give me a rifle." She positioned him in a corner where he could cover 2 approaches without having to turn his damaged torso. Then she moved to Sullivan, checked his calf wound, reinforced the bandage, and retrieved his backup weapon. "You're hit," Webb noted, gesturing to her shoulder. Catherine glanced at the blood soaking her uniform. Later, she returned to the main breach, where enemy fire had renewed after a brief lull. They were regrouping, preparing for another push. Catherine counted muzzle flashes, estimated numbers, calculated time. "Sir," she called to Hartley, "they're going to rush us in approximately 90 seconds. They'll use the dust cloud from their next RPG as cover." "How do you know?" "Because that's what I would do." Hartley absorbed this, accepted it, and began repositioning his team. "Everyone hold fire on my command. Let them commit to the breach. Then we light them up from the flanks." It was a good plan, made better by Catherine's read of the enemy's intention. When the RPG came, when the fighters poured through the dust and smoke, they found not scattered resistance but coordinated ambush. The SEAL's fire was devastating at close range, turning the breach into a fatal funnel. The attack broke. Catherine immediately called for ceasefire, conserving ammunition. In the relative quiet that followed, she heard something that made her smile grimly. Shouting from outside the compound, voices raised in argument. The enemy was debating their next move. "They didn't expect this," she said. "They're reconsidering the cost." "Will they break off?" Martinez asked. "No, but they'll be more cautious, which buys us time." Time for what? No one asked. They had no reinforcements coming, no extraction plan, no communication with command. But time was still a commodity worth having. Catherine used it to check every wounded man, to redistribute supplies, to ensure each shooter had water and ammunition positioned within easy reach. She moved with quiet efficiency, and the SEALs watched her with new eyes. "You're not just a medic," Thompson said. "It was not a question. I'm whatever we need me to be right now." Webb approached Hartley at the command post, speaking low. "Sir, we need to address this. She's running tactical. The team is following her guidance. That's not chain of command." Hartley watched Catherine teaching Sullivan a technique for shooting with his injured hand. Watched the younger SEAL nodding, watched him immediately apply the instruction with improved effect. "Right now, Chief, I don't care if she's the janitor. She's keeping us alive. We'll sort out the rest if we survive." The afternoon stretched toward evening. The enemy probed twice more, testing different approaches, but each time Catherine identified their intent and positioned the team to counter it. She was playing chess while they played checkers, always 2 moves ahead, always reading the pattern. During a lull, She moved to the upper floor to assess their position from a higher vantage. The destruction was extensive. Holes in the walls provided lines of sight but also made them vulnerable. She counted enemy positions, marked their locations mentally, estimated their remaining strength. 15 fighters visible, probably another 5 to 8 in reserve. Against 4 fully combat-effective SEALs, 2 limited by wounds, and 2 unable to fight. The math was still bad, but it was better than it had been. She descended and found Hartley reloading magazines from loose ammunition scattered across the floor. "Report," he said. Catherine gave him a concise tactical summary. Enemy strength, disposition, probable courses of action. She spoke the language of operations, orders, of military decision-making, of someone who had attended the same schools and courses as the men around her. When she finished, Hartley studied her for a long moment. "What happened to you, Catherine?" "I made a choice. They decided it was the wrong one. I got reassigned. From what to medical? From operational to medical." The weight of that statement hung between them. Operational meant shooter, meant someone on the assault force, meant someone trusted with the most dangerous and critical tasks. "Why didn't you tell us? Would it have mattered?" The orders were clear. "I'm medical personnel. I carry bandages, not rifles. You're carrying one now." Catherine looked at the weapon in her hands, this tool she had promised not to use again. "Yes, sir. I am." The enemy launched their next attack at 1,847 hours, just as the light began to fail. This time they used smoke grenades, trying to obscure their approach. Catherine countered by positioning the team to cover likely avenues rather than visible targets, forcing the enemy to move through predetermined kill zones. In the middle of the firefight, Davidson's condition deteriorated. His blood pressure crashed, his breathing grew shallow. Catherine was engaging targets when she heard Webb call for medical assistance. She finished her current magazine, dropped it, and transitioned from shooter to medic in the time it took to cross the room. Her hands, steady on the trigger moments before, were equally steady, placing an IV line, administering fluids, adjusting the tourniquet that had been in place too long. "Stay with me, Davidson," she murmured, checking his pulse, monitoring his level of consciousness. "You're pretty good with that rifle, Doc," he whispered. "Shut up and breathe." She stabilized him as much as possible, then returned to her rifle. The duality felt natural, felt right, felt like the person she had always been meant to be before regulations and review boards had tried to split her in half. Sullivan watched her move between roles, his expression thoughtful despite the pain from his wounded leg. "You do this before? The switching?" Catherine cleared a malfunction in her rifle, charged it, returned to firing. Between shots, she answered, "I did everything before. Then I did only one thing. Now I'm doing everything again." It was the most she had said about her past, and it was enough. Sullivan nodded and returned his attention to his own sector, accepting this new reality. Their medic was also their best shooter, and in this particular version of hell, they needed both. The smoke cleared, the attack repelled. Catherine conducted another casualty assessment, checking every man, redistributing pain medication from her dwindling supplies. Pierce's breathing had worsened, his pneumothorax progressing despite her earlier intervention. "I need to decompress your chest," she told him. "Here, here, and now." She performed the procedure in the dim light with enemy fire cracking overhead, her hands certain despite the circumstances. The needle went in precisely where it needed to, and Pierce's breathing immediately improved. She taped it in place, marked it with a field dressing so others would know not to disturb it. "Better?" "Yeah, thanks, Doc." "You're welcome. Now get back on that rifle." It was dark when Martinez approached her, at what had become her primary fighting position. "Question, if you don't mind." "Go ahead." "Why'd they pull you off operations?" Catherine sighted down her rifle at a suspected enemy position. Did not fire, conserved the round. There was a mission. Hostage rescue. The rules of engagement were strict. We could only shoot if directly engaged. The hostages were being executed while we watched. I made a decision. You engaged? I eliminated the threat. Saved 7 lives. Violated a direct order. The review board decided I was too aggressive, too willing to interpret ROE creatively. They said I lacked the judgment for operational roles. That's garbage. That's politics. So they made me a medic. Figured I could save lives that way instead. Guess they were wrong about the judgment thing. Catherine allowed herself a brief smile. Guess they were. Night brought new challenges and temporary respite. The enemy settled into a pattern of harassment fire, keeping the SEALs awake and on edge, but not committing to another major assault. They were waiting for something: reinforcements, better weapons, or simply dawn when they could coordinate more effectively. Hartley called his team together in the darkened building. 6 men able to fight in varying degrees, 2 unable, 1 who was both medic and operator, and diminishing hope for extraction. "I need to know what we have," Hartley said. "Catherine, you first. Who are you?" She set down her rifle, met his eyes. Catherine Elizabeth Reynolds, former Staff Sergeant, 75th Ranger Regiment, 3rd Battalion, qualified as Ranger School graduate, Sniper School, Military Freefall, Combat Lifesaver, 3 deployments, 2 in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan prior to reassignment. After the incident I mentioned, I was given a choice: leave service or accept reassignment to Medical Corps. I chose Medical Corps, went through a 6-month training program, and have served as combat medic for 14 months. The SEALs processed this information in silence. A Ranger, and not just any Ranger, but someone with qualifications that rivaled or exceeded their own in certain areas. "Why hide it?" Webb asked. "I wasn't hiding it. I was following orders. The terms of my reassignment were explicit. I would serve in medical capacity only. No combat operations, no weapon carry except in immediate self-defense. I was permitted to maintain my skills on my own time, but prohibited from employing them professionally. Until today," Hartley said. "Until today, sir. When it became clear that following those orders would result in our deaths, I made another choice. I'll face whatever consequences come afterward, but I will not watch good people die when I have the skills to prevent it." Kowalski, still foggy from his head injury, spoke up. "You're a better shot than any of us." "I'm adequate." "Bullshit. I saw that first kill. That was 1,000 hours of range time, minimum." Catherine did not dispute it. She had spent those 1,000 hours, and many more, had qualified as expert on every weapon system the Army employed, had once held the top score in her company for long-range marksmanship. Pierce, breathing more easily after her intervention, asked the question several others were thinking: "Can you get us out of here? I can give us a better chance. The enemy has us surrounded, but they're not professionals. They're militia, probably local, augmented by some experienced fighters but lacking cohesive leadership. They have numbers and position. We have training and discipline. If we can survive until dawn, we might be able to break out during their morning prayer routine." "That's a lot of ifs," Martinez noted. "It's more hope than we had an hour ago." Hartley made a decision. "Catherine, you have tactical control for planning purposes. I maintain command authority, but I want your assessment and recommendations for our best course of action." It was an unusual arrangement, but these were unusual circumstances. Catherine accepted the responsibility without hesitation, because she had trained for this, had prepared for this, even during the months when she was forbidden from doing exactly this. She gathered what intelligence they had, what ammunition remained, what physical condition each team member was in. She factored in terrain, enemy capabilities, likely reinforcement patterns, and weather. Then she built a plan. "We have 2 options," she began. "First, we defend in place, try to hold until someone realizes we're missing and sends a rescue force. That could be 12 hours or it could be 3 days. Davidson won't survive 3 days. Pierce probably won't either. The rest of us would be combat ineffective from exhaustion within 24 hours. Second option?" Webb asked. "We break out, hit them before dawn, during their lowest alert period. We move fast, move light, leave the building through an unexpected route, and punch through their weakest sector. We carry our wounded and we run until we reach ground we can actually defend, or until we make contact with friendly forces." "The wounded slow us down," Sullivan said, then quickly added, "Not saying we leave them, just stating fact." "They do slow us down," Catherine agreed, "which is why we need to reduce the load. I propose we split into 2 elements, a breakout team of our 4 most combat-effective personnel, and a security team that stays with the wounded and provides covering fire for our exit. Once the breakout team clears the immediate area, they can loop back to extract the security team and wounded." It was risky. It was desperate. It was also the only plan that did not end with them dying in this building. "I'll lead the breakout team," Hartley said. "With respect, sir, I should lead it. I have the most recent training in close quarters battle, and I'm the best shot in this room. You're needed to coordinate both elements and make command decisions." The logic was sound, even if the implications were uncomfortable. Hartley had years of experience, but Catherine had skills honed specifically for the type of fighting they were about to do. "Who else on breakout?" he asked, accepting her assessment. "Webb, Thompson, and Martinez. Webb has the second best marksmanship scores based on what I've observed. Thompson can move despite his arm wound, and Martinez has proven adaptable. Sullivan, Pierce, and Kowalski stay with you and Davidson, holding the building and covering our movement. When? Webb asked. Catherine checked her watch. 0430 hours. 2 hours before dawn. We use the darkness, hit them while they're tired and inattentive, and we move like our lives depend on it, because they do. The next 3 hours were spent preparing. Catherine distributed the remaining ammunition, prioritizing the breakout team but ensuring the rear guard had enough to sustain covering fire. She checked and rechecked everyone's medical condition, stabilized Davidson and Pierce as much as possible, and ensured Kowalski understood his role despite the concussion. At 0400 hours, she gathered the breakout team for final coordination. In the darkness, she sketched their route, using a red lens flashlight on a piece of cardboard. We exit through the northwest corner where the wall partially collapsed. It's the point they've guarded least because the rubble makes it look impassable. We make it passable. Martinez goes first, clears the immediate area. Thompson follows, secures left. I go third, secure right. Webb comes last, provides rear security. We move in diamond formation after that, with me on point because I have the best low-light visibility and close-range reflexes. You sure about that? Webb asked. It was not challenge, just verification. I've done this before, Chief. Trust me or replace me, but decide now. Webb looked at Hartley. The lieutenant commander nodded. Webb returned his attention to Catherine. I trust you. Just keep us alive. At 0415 hours, they moved into position. Catherine led them to the northwest corner, where 2 walls had partially collapsed from earlier fighting. The rubble was treacherous but navigable. She tested her route, found the quiet path, and marked it for the others to follow. At 0428 hours, she checked her rifle one final time. Full magazine, round chambered, safety off. She looked at the 3 men who would follow her into darkness and probable death. Stay close. Stay quiet. When I engage, you engage. When I move, you move. Questions? There were none. At 0430 hours precisely, Catherine Reynolds climbed through the rubble and into the night. The enemy had indeed been lax in guarding this sector, perhaps assuming the Americans would not be foolish enough to try a breakout through such difficult terrain. Catherine moved through their positions like a ghost, using every shadow, every depression in the ground, every fragment of cover. Behind her, 3 Navy SEALs men who prided themselves on their stealth struggled to match her silent movement. They covered 50 meters before encountering their first sentry. Catherine saw him before he saw her, a figure silhouetted against the slightly lighter eastern sky. She closed the distance, eliminated the threat with her knife rather than her rifle, and dragged the body into shadow. The entire engagement took 6 seconds and made no sound louder than an exhaled breath. Webb watched this with professional appreciation. He had trained with Army Rangers before, had cross-trained with Delta and Special Forces, but he had never seen someone move quite like Catherine moved. She was not just competent, she was exceptional. They reached the compound wall. Catherine identified the guard tower, counted the men in it, calculated angles. She hand-signaled to Webb. 2 targets, simultaneous engagement required. He nodded, understanding. On her mark, they fired together. Both guards dropped. The team was over the wall in 15 seconds, spreading into their diamond formation, moving toward the tree line 200 meters distant. Halfway there, someone shouted behind them. The alarm had been raised. Automatic weapons fire ripped through the darkness, high and poorly aimed but increasing in volume. "Run!" Catherine commanded, and they ran. The covering fire from the building erupted behind them, Hartley's team engaging to draw attention away from the breakout element. It worked. Most of the enemy fire shifted back toward the building, giving Catherine's team the seconds they needed to reach the trees. Once in the relative safety of the vegetation, Catherine halted them. 30-second security halt, drink water, check ammunition, prepare to move again. They were breathing hard but still combat effective. Catherine allowed herself to feel a moment of hope. They had made it this far. Now they needed to complete the loop, circle back, and extract their wounded before the enemy realized what had happened. That was when the helicopter appeared. The UH-60 Black Hawk came in low and fast, its door gunners already engaging targets around the compound. It was not the rescue they had expected, because they had called for no rescue, but someone had noticed their absence, had tracked their last known position, and had sent a quick reaction force. "All friendly elements, mark your position," a voice called over the emergency frequency. Catherine keyed her backup radio, the one she had been carrying but assumed was dead like the primary. Breakout team, 200 meters northwest of compound in tree line. 4 personnel, combat effective. Rear guard, still in northern building, Hartley's voice added. 4 personnel, 2 critical wounded, taking heavy fire. The helicopter made its decision instantly. It could not land in the compound under that volume of fire, but it could suppress the enemy positions long enough for the building's occupants to evacuate. Catherine, the pilot's voice came through, and she recognized it. Chief Warrant Officer Rachel Brennan, someone she had worked with 2 years ago, before the reassignment. Can your element move to alternate LZ? Catherine checked her map, oriented herself. Affirm. Grid NA 384-72156. Approximately 15 minutes, at tactical pace. Roger. We'll extract the building first, then come for you. Stay low, stay quiet. The Black Hawk circled the compound, its guns devastating the enemy positions. Catherine watched through the trees as Hartley's team emerged from the building, carrying Davidson and Pierce. The helicopter descended just long enough for them to load aboard, then climbed steeply, taking fire but absorbing it into its armored hull. Move, Catherine told her team, and they moved. 15 minutes later, they reached the alternate landing zone, a small clearing barely large enough for the helicopter. It came in hard, flared at the last second, and the team scrambled aboard. As the Black Hawk climbed away, Catherine looked down at the compound, at the building they had defended, at the bodies scattered around it. The pilot's voice came through her headset. Catherine Reynolds. Heard you picked up a rifle again. Circumstances required it, ma'am. I'm sure they did. We'll discuss it when we get back. The 20-minute flight to forward operating base was silent, except for the rotors. Catherine sat with her team, helping the crew chief treat the wounded, her hands returning to medical mode now that the immediate crisis had passed. When they landed, the base was a flurry of activity. Medical teams rushed to take Davidson and Pierce. Intelligence officers descended to debrief the team, and standing near the operations center, waiting with an expression that promised difficult conversations ahead, was Colonel Marcus Freeman, the officer who had overseen Catherine's reassignment 2 years earlier. But first came the medical checks, the preliminary debriefs, the administrative processing of people who had nearly died. Hartley's team was separated, each member giving individual accounts of what had happened. When Catherine's turn came, she told the truth. She had violated her reassignment orders. She had engaged in combat operations. She had led tactical movements and made command decisions. She had done everything she had promised not to do. The intelligence officer taking her statement looked up from his notes. And you believe this was justified? I believe 8 American service members are alive who would otherwise be dead, sir. I'll accept whatever consequences come from my actions, but I won't apologize for them. After the formal debrief came the informal gathering. The SEALs had been given quarters to rest, recover, and decompress. Catherine found them in a corner of the base, sitting together the way teams did after missions, processing what they had survived. Webb saw her first. He stood, and the others followed. There was a moment of awkward silence, these men who had learned today that their medic was also a warrior, uncertain how to address this new reality. Then Webb extended his hand. Staff Sergeant Reynolds. Catherine shook it. It's just Catherine, Chief. I'm still Medical Corps. Maybe not for long, Martinez said. Once word gets out what happened, word will get out, Sullivan confirmed, and there will be questions about why someone with your skills was sidelined. Hartley appeared in the doorway, still wearing the dust and blood of the mission. He looked at Catherine for a long moment before speaking. I wrote my preliminary report. I described what happened, including your role. I also included my opinion that your reassignment was a waste of capability, and that your actions today exemplify the kind of initiative and judgment we need in special operations. Sir, you don't have to. I know I don't have to, but I'm going to. Because what I saw today was not someone violating orders. What I saw was someone making the right call in an impossible situation. That's exactly the kind of judgment that got you into trouble before, and it's exactly the kind of judgment that saved us. Catherine nodded, not trusting herself to speak. These men, who had started the day barely noticing her, were now putting their careers on the line to defend hers. Besides, Kowalski added, you still need to finish treating my concussion. Can't let you get kicked out before you clear me for duty. The tension broke with quiet laughter. Someone produced coffee, and they sat together as the Afghan dawn brightened outside, processing the mission, the fight, the survival. 3 days later, Catherine stood outside Colonel Freeman's office, her dress uniform crisp, her mind calm. She had spent the intervening time continuing to treat the wounded, debriefing with various levels of command, and preparing for this moment. The door opened. "Come in, Reynolds." Freeman's office was sparse, decorated only with the memorabilia of a career spent in service. He gestured to a chair. She sat. "I've read the reports," Freeman began. "All of them. The team leaders, the individual statements, the tactical analysis from intelligence. I've also had conversations with some people who have strong opinions about your actions." Catherine waited. "You violated the terms of your reassignment. The terms were clear. Medical duties only, no combat operations. You not only engaged in combat operations, you led them. You made tactical decisions. You commanded experienced operators. All things you were explicitly prohibited from doing." "Yes, sir." "Do you have anything to say in your defense?" Catherine met his eyes. "No, sir. My actions speak for themselves. If the consequence is separation from service, I accept that. But I will not say I was wrong to do what I did." Freeman leaned back in his chair, studying her. "2 years ago, you were one of the most promising young operators in the Ranger Regiment. Your instructors said you had the potential to go anywhere, do anything. Then you made a choice in that hostage situation. You killed 3 men who were executing unarmed civilians, despite rules of engagement that prohibited offensive action. I remember, sir. The review board decided you were too aggressive, too quick to interpret orders in ways that suited your tactical assessment rather than policy requirements. They said you lacked the judgment for operational roles. I disagreed, but I was outvoted. This was new information. Catherine had not known Freeman had opposed her reassignment. "I thought," Freeman continued, "that medical service would give you a way to contribute while keeping you out of situations where your tendency to prioritize mission success over rule compliance would create problems. I was wrong." He pulled a folder from his desk. "This morning, I received a request from Naval Special Warfare Command. They want to attach you to SEAL Team Operations as a combat medic with tactical authority. They've requested your reassignment to a new program that's being established. Combat medics with previous operational experience who can serve dual roles when circumstances require." Catherine's heart rate increased, but she kept her expression neutral. "I'm recommending approval," Freeman said. "With conditions. You'll undergo additional training in their protocols. You'll be subject to their command structure. And you'll agree to counseling sessions to ensure you understand when to follow orders and when to exercise the initiative that makes you valuable. Are those terms acceptable?" "Yes, sir." Freeman stood, offered his hand. "Don't make me regret this, Catherine." She shook his hand firmly. "I won't, sir." 6 months later, Catherine Reynolds stood in the briefing room of a classified location, listening to the mission parameters for an operation she could not discuss in a place whose name she could not share. Around her sat operators from multiple special operations units, planning a mission that would require medical expertise, tactical precision, and someone willing to make hard choices. She was still a medic. She still carried gauze and tourniquets, still knew how to save lives under the worst conditions. But now she also carried a rifle, and when circumstances required, she was authorized to use it. The team leader, a Marine raider she had worked with twice before, finished the briefing and looked around the room. "Questions?" Catherine raised her hand. "Rules of engagement, sir?" "Defensive force, authorized. Offensive action requires my direct approval." She nodded, satisfied. Clear rules, clear authority, clear understanding of when to ask and when to act. After the briefing, as the team conducted equipment checks, the Marine approached her. "I read about Afghanistan, about what you did with the SEALs. It was necessary. I know. That's why you're here. Because when it's necessary, you do what needs doing. Just remember, follow the orders when you can. Break them only when you have to." Catherine smiled slightly. "That's the same advice Colonel Freeman gave me, sir. Smart man, Freeman. You should listen to him." "I intend to, sir." That night, sitting in her quarters, Catherine cleaned her rifle with the same care she organized her medical supplies. Both were tools of her trade now, both necessary, both part of who she was. The Army had tried to make her choose between warrior and healer, had tried to split her into pieces that fit their administrative categories. She had proven that some people could not be split, some people were meant to be whole. Somewhere in the world, there were people who needed saving, and when the time came, Catherine Reynolds would save them, with medicine if possible, with her rifle if necessary, but she would save them.